So we're switching here to, and Sanjay's question at the end of the last panel, I think, provided a nice transition. We're switching here to ask, okay, we've talked about sustainability in a larger sense and in the sense of Juneau. What's going on at UAS? What can we do about it here at UAS? Alex will address that a little bit and talk about our survey in general, and then the roundtable will be even more specifically oriented in that direction. But during the break, we have an announcement for a student internship that I thought I would take a minute and just say something about. I didn't actually get a chance to read it all the way through, but it's a greenhouse gas emissions analysis, and it's with the CBJ. So if you're interested, I have a flyer here, and I think that Maria is here. There she is. If you're interested, grab her after the session and talk with her. So there's an opportunity. So it's my pleasure again to introduce. This way, he went over there. Dr. Alex Simon, he's a professor of sociology here and specializes in environmental sociology. And he will tell you a little bit about the survey and then tell about the survey results. So please join me in welcoming Alex Simon.
It's good to see so many people turning out. So with this survey, I noticed that there are a lot of my students attending, and so one thing I would emphasize as far as our methodology, don't do as I do, do as I say as far as data collection. So there's the committee, when we decided to do a survey, we knew from the start that certainly it wouldn't be a random or also known as a probability sample, that there's obviously a lot of self-selection occurring. And we didn't start out with any theories or hypotheses before we collected the data. But we did think it would be interesting to get some gauge of to what extent are people willing to alter their behaviors. Now, obviously, when so the survey was talked about on the local NPR station and it's on the college website, but there's a lot of self-selection occurring here. And so that the level of ecological concern is going to be artificially inflated from the survey, but that I think it's gives us somewhat of a feel for the manner in which people are thinking, and also I think it's just a good tool for stimulating interest and concern around these issues. And also I do think that at least some of the questions could be used where in the future where it's more of a probability sample taken. So I do think that at least we're pre-testing some questions. And so one of the good things, if you look at the number of respondents, and this still is you can still take this survey if you care to, but to have 205 respondents, and it hasn't really been available for that long. And so I just want to go through some of the quantitative data and then get into some of the more interesting comments that were made as well. So if we look at this first, as far as generating electricity by hydropower, that you see a significant number of individuals saying that they strongly agree that they would that is an important goal, and very few people saying that they strongly disagree, and that many people saying, well, that changing their personal people changing their personal behaviors is something that should be emphasized. As far as willingness to change personal behavior, again, you see that certainly the majority of the people are willing to change their behaviors. Now, interesting, where it gets interesting is when you start talking about costing money. We'll get onto that a little later. Now, looking at the question on global warming, and I'm going to deal with this toward the end of this presentation. Now, again, this is a biased sample, right? So I think it's safe to assume that most of the people that took who took the survey are more concerned than the average person about issues like global warming or other ecological issues, and probably more informed than the general public. This sample is actually more educated than the general public. But we see, you know, in the year 2008, as far as saying is global warming a real phenomenon, still a substantial amount of people. If you look at from the mid-range on to strongly disagreeing that's a real phenomenon. To me, I was actually surprised that many people were saying that they really don't think it's an actual problem. And I'll get into some of the reasons why I think it's possible in the year 2008 to say, well, that the data is not out there, there's not conclusive data on global warming, and how individuals are able to deny it at this point. So willingness to reduce hot water showers by 25%, a pretty substantial number of people willing to do that. Turning down thermostats by 2 degrees, and so we see a lot of willingness to do that. Changing the lights in the house. Compact fluorescent light bulbs. Now, there were some interesting comments made about compact fluorescent light bulbs, which I'll get when we get down to the comments. I'll address those. So willing to put in power strips. And I think this question, increasing the temperature of the refrigerator, I think that was a little bit confusing. And so, obviously, if you're increasing the temperature of your refrigerator, you're actually you're not cooling it as much. And so I think that's why it's a little bit of more diversity with those answers. So I think that was a somewhat confusing question. Now, attacking the sacred cow of the PFD. And that's pretty common with anything when people actually see it as making some sort of economic sacrifice, that the willingness to make any sort of change goes down. And so that what most economists say as far as shaping people's behaviors, it has to be a combination of, you know, the carrot and the stick, and so economic incentives and penalties as far as shaping someone's behavior, and probably just relying on goodwill and self-sacrifice is probably not going to increase efficiency dramatically. You know, I do think that forums like this are good as far as increasing awareness and stimulating that, but probably it needs to go farther than that. So again, when we look at spending $50 a month, there's a lot more diversity in that. So, and more people willing to address things in the workplace. Now, another sacred cow. If we look at closing down stores. So that we certainly think that we should be able to get whatever we want, whenever we want. So that certainly a lot of energy could be saved by reduced business hours. But that there's not so much of a consensus on that, so a lot more diversity on that. And taxing the tourist industry, people like that. Cruise ships. Oh, okay, so the business hours is that, no, people certainly want to be able to shop whenever they want to shop. So with 31, we see less interest in investing in wind turbines. Now onto the comments. I don't have a good answer for why does it rain so much in Juneau, but So there's actually quite a few comments. Some of the more interesting ones, obviously the people who participated in this actually put quite a bit of thought into their ecological footprint. And so there were many comments about compact fluorescent bulbs and the mercury. So they're saying, well, if we switch over those, aren't we just creating another problem by the mercury, you know, once they're disposed of? And evidently, that even in standard fluorescent bulbs or lights, there is mercury, and so that I guess the ecologically responsible thing to do is, yes, switch over to compact fluorescents, but then also make sure that don't just throw them into the garbage. That make sure that they're disposed of safely. So there was a lot of concern on that. And then also a lot of people said, well, I'm already doing these things. That, you know, they said it was skewed in that way, is that they can't really make any more improvements. Now, there was a couple on the global warming that I want to get to. I can find that. Okay, you have obviously bought into the unproven theory that global warming is caused by humans, and your questions all seem to be designed with one agenda in mind: increased government intervention into our private lives. Personal energy usage is self-regulated by economics. You use less when you pay less. Why do we need another top-heavy tax-funded agency to tell us that? Businesses are the same. Okay. We need to stop we need to think about growth. This requires energy available now, fossil fuels, open and more for a start. And so there were a couple, you know, that definitely saying that this global warming is a myth. And that one of the things I find interesting is how do people construct knowledge. And, well, that, you know, I think that you could be, you know, certainly an intelligent person and also take the position that that global warming is not a real phenomenon, or that it's not caused by human activities. Now, when I say, you know, being an intelligent person, is that people will hold all kinds of irrational thoughts, essentially. That, well, one of the ways that people construct their knowledge is by just listening to the news and looking at you know, the scientific data that's portrayed through the mainstream media. What do you think about the mainstream media? Do they present it as an issue where there's a scientific consensus that the problem is there? For the most part, okay. Does anybody have any comments on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen a mainstream media, except reporting on some people, dispute it. Like they're just commenting on the fact that there is some kind of dispute, but it's mostly
Yeah, it's mostly like a Sunday morning, like, and in other news, we have some people disputing global warming. You know, it's more of an aside than a reality.
Anybody else have comments?
If you say that global warming doesn't exist, you're taking some huge risks going public and saying something like that.
I was saying, you mean in mainstream media? Yeah. At least my perception would be
just one example.
Yeah. Oh, go on.
Okay, just one example. Bob Lutz, who's the vice president of General Motors in charge of vehicle development, was quoted in Texas, a round table with a group of journalists, saying that, in so many words, that global warming, in his estimation, was a total crock of, okay, and it was a huge publicity embarrassment and a bad deal for General Motors on an image level, for sure.
And I think anytime you have like an automobile company, they're going to be seen as speaking out of self-interest, or like if ExxonMobil is saying that. But at least my perception, and actually there's been studies done on the mainstream media outlets, is it in many cases is actually presented as some sort of theory where there's not a strong consensus among scientists, and so that the debate is still out there. Yeah.
That's where you get your news. Yeah, I mean,
right.
We're talking America.
Right.
I take it you're talking about U.S. mainstream news,
right.
as opposed to
absolutely.
The bulk of the world media that says that
right.
U.S.
Oh no, but how could you be saying? Well, I mean, I know that like 20 million people tune into Rush Limbaugh every day, and that he certainly said that it doesn't exist. But even if you go to like CBS, ABC, it's not presented as it certainly isn't presented as something that's concluded. Right. So I think that's one of the problems. But then there's the other thing occurring. Well, you know, why do so many people at this point believe in global warming? I guess I should talk about that a bit. Well, so that obviously, I guess if you believe President Bush, he says it's a real phenomenon. So one of the things that they did is they ordered a study by the National Academy of Science, and they said, yes, it is a real phenomenon, and yes, it is being caused by human activities. And so that at this point, even President Bush says it's a real phenomenon, but I believe their official position is what we need to do is grow the economy so we can pay for the worst effects when it occurs, and so you can build like dikes around New York City so it doesn't get flooded and this sort of thing. But at this juncture, even George Bush is saying it's a real phenomenon. Even like Bill O'Reilly saying it's a real phenomenon. Well, in another way that so there's so many sources right now saying it's a real phenomenon. But another way that I think is probably more powerful that people construct their knowledge is just local knowledge, direct experience. And that information disseminated by corporations, disseminated by governments, it doesn't really have much of effect unless it resonates with people's daily experiences. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be true, right? But it has to be some kind of congruence with what people experience. Now, think about your own lives, that for most people, there is some congruence between what they experience every day and this idea that global warming is actually a real phenomenon. So myself, I'm originally from upstate New York, and I think about, well, now they don't have these -20 snaps. They used to have maybe 3-week-long -20 snaps, and I had a neighbor that decided in the 80s they were going to start up a cross-country ski resort, and they went bankrupt because it just the snow wasn't there, and so there's less snow. That I've moved around quite a bit, and wherever I've lived, this idea of local knowledge. I remember when I lived in Utah, and a nice woman across the street saying, well, Mount Timpanogos used to have snow on it all year long, and now it doesn't. Now, I've never lived in a community where there's so much local knowledge that would say that it's a real phenomenon. So what sort of examples might people cite at the local level? Well, 4, yeah, at the local level, yeah. Well, when somebody mentioned glaciers, I mean, I was astounded. So, to me, like somebody who's 18 years old looks like they're 12 now, and that when they're saying, "Oh yeah, when I was a kid, this glacier was bigger," and I think, well, that's pretty scary. So thinking about and then of course having to relocate villages. There's all kinds of things where it jives directly with people's experiences. But we see still sort of a holdout in the sample, and I think that certainly I see the media as a large part of it. But I wanted to switch over to another data set that I think might shed some light on why people or some folks are still holding on to this particular belief. Now, this is some data that I collected several years ago when I was a professor down at Utah Valley State College. And that one of the things I noticed is that students seem to have very high material aspirations. And so one of the things that my co-author and I asked was, you know, how many bedroom house do you want? We didn't go with square footage because we figured that for most students that wouldn't really matter. And so that quite high material aspirations as far as the house that they're going to live in. So the bulk of the sample wanting a house that's like 5 bedrooms or more. Now I don't know how much that would cost in Juneau to have a house, these huge houses. Now the other thing is that half of the sample said that they wanted another house for their personal use, so not a rental property, but just for their personal use. Now, if you think about the goals that you have in your mind, if you're saying, well, that you want some huge house, but that global warming is a real phenomenon, and that personal consumption matters, that creates cognitive dissonance, right? That to reduce that, you have to say, well, the jury isn't really out. It's kind of like, I think that you've all known somebody who's like a chain smoker who denies that tobacco is addictive or that it's related to cancer. That certainly, and you can be in other areas a totally intelligent person and believe these particular things. So these material aspirations, as far as income goes, now as far as ecological impact, that the higher somebody's income, the greater their ecological impact. I mean, if you think about a family that lives on a modest income, or a poor family living in the South Bronx, for instance, and they live in a small apartment, they're taking the subway every place, and they're not traveling much, their ecological impact is relatively low compared to, say, professionals who are jetting off to conferences and taking exotic vacations and living in large homes. Well, that top bar is, so this is undergraduate students, the salary that they desire, and the bar below that is just the median income within the United States. And so obviously they want salaries much higher. They want salaries much higher than the median income. And actually, for whatever reason, 100% of this sample, so it was about 150 people, said that they wanted to just stop at the bachelor's degree. Now, jumping down to the doctoral degree, and you see the people with doctoral degrees making over $80,000 a year. Professors always get upset when I present this data because they're saying, well, why am I not making over $80,000 a year? Well, what this is, so this is from the U.S. Census. This is for year-round employees, so people who are working 12 months a year, and so that most of us are on 9-month contracts, so we're not actually. So that may explain a little bit of it, at least. So going down to the bachelor's degree, people wanting to make somewhere, and that's what the average person with a bachelor's degree is making. Now this was done. This is data gathered in Utah, and did find a gender difference, and so that men wanted to make about $130,000 a year, and women wanted to make somewhere around $100,000 a year. Do you think that means that women are less materialistic than men? More realistic? Well, in the comments, what inflated it was that some of the women said, well, I don't plan on working, but I want to marry somebody who makes $1 million. So that they were, thinking so I don't think it was really that they were less materialistic or more realistic, but the desire. And the most disturbing thing I found with this data set was the vehicle. Now, and I think that's fairly predictable, that, well, what are the most popular vehicles being the large truck or the SUV, because you think that's certainly what's promoted. And that somewhere around 6% of the sample wanting to drive a zero emissions or hybrid vehicle. What we didn't ask, and so you always think of these things after you gather the data, minivans weren't that popular. Why would you think minivans aren't that popular with undergraduates?
Suburban mom.
Right, yeah, so they're not particularly cool. I guess what I wish we had done is asked not only what type of vehicle you want, but how many. And that certainly that most households are multi-vehicle households, and people will have certainly in many cases one for every member of the family, or sometimes more than that. According to the American Lung Association, so this was taken, this was in Orem, Utah. It's some of the worst air quality in the nation. And so what I found really disturbing about this is, at what point does somebody make a connection between their personal behavior and the environment that they live in? So it would get bad enough where with the air, where you could see the smog in the air, that they would say that kids shouldn't be outdoors to play. That I was riding my bike to work, as I couldn't on those days, so it was kind of ironic having to drive, or to jog would actually have to travel up into the mountains to get above the smog, because otherwise you could literally feel it burning. So I think that there has to be a very strong level of denial among people, because you can't simultaneously say, well, I'm having this devastating ecological impact, and having this devastating ecological impact, and also desire, huge houses, huge vehicles, and the like. So at least that's my take on how somebody could actually believe that global warming isn't a real phenomenon at this point. I don't know, do you have any other ideas yourselves?
Don't you think people probably think that they're just a drop in the bucket, you know what I'm saying? That also,
Sure.
But in addition, you were talking about the different people seeing global warming as a real problem, but then still wanting a huge house and a second house. But I think that also these issues are in danger of kind of becoming like Hallmark holidays, where it becomes a reason to buy things. So everyone's like, oh, I justify buying a brand new Prius, or, you buy more things to become more sustainable, which is sort of reverse of the way it should be. You should sort of limit your.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the bus isn't cool, but
Right,
things like that.
Yeah, and actually, I think you brought up a very good point. There's there was this British economist, Jevons, and I can't remember his first name, but this idea of that. Well, the solution is more consumption, essentially, what you're saying, and that's I really do think that technology is certainly part of the answer, but not all the answer is in cases like this. Is that as things become more energy efficient, price of operating goes down, and so consumption goes up. And so if you think about more efficient cars, but compared to 50 years ago, we have so many more of them. Or maybe houses are more efficient than they used to be, but they're bigger. Right. And that, yeah. So and that's what's really fostered in our society, is that buying is pretty much the solution to everything. The market is going to take care of everything. Yeah. Any other ideas why somebody could deny global warming after George Bush said it was true? Yeah. Oh.
Well, I think there's a lot of insular communities, and so if you grew up in a location, maybe like the one I grew up in, where logging is how people sustain their economic baseline, I think most of the kids that grow up there grow up thinking that there's all these really bad people that we call environmentalists trying to ruin our life and take away our jobs. So, it could just be the community that you're part of.
So like a blanket denial at the local level, yeah.
I think the problem is largely rooted in our society's lack of understanding of science and how science works, and that scientists, when they come up with results, can get spurious results given the same design. So that if you conducted the same experiment 100 times, 5% of the time, we know the probabilities in most cases, 5% of the time, you'll have results that verify the opposite of truth in a real sense. And most people don't understand that what you're doing when you're applying statistical approaches is trying to understand the probability of being right.
Yeah, and to conclusively prove anything using scientific methods is certainly a difficult thing to do. Yeah.
It might be based on the fact that we're a society that depends on information more than we depend upon knowledge. And if you say the difference between, like if you ask a question, who's the most environmental president since Roosevelt? No one will say Nixon, but he's the one who created the EPA and
Clean Water Act.
Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, rather he signed it, he didn't oppose it. And he was just operating under the body of knowledge that was prepared, that paved the way for that people were prepared for that. They understood their impacts. And a book like Silent Spring can come out and just catapult people into knowledge. You know, they understand it. Well, now we have no knowledge. We have information. We're bombarded by it. And for everything you say, I can say different. And I can prove you even more, as long as I have Wikipedia right there. So, yeah, it's an opinion. Like the fact when facts become opinion, that's the frightening the trend.
Yeah, no, and I think that certainly has changed in society. The idea.
So I hate to cut this conversation off, but I want to maintain the schedule here such that we have time to have the next conversation. So at this point, if I could call the panelists for the roundtable down.